Matt and I got to know each other during the campaign. I invited Matt to come on because I can't think of anyone who ran a more comprehensive, thorough, almost by the book, but beyond that too, not only by the book, but innovative campaign, knocked on a ton of doors, probably had one of the best feels for what was going on in Kitchener as anyone, and the team that he had put together. So I thought it'd be great to have Matt's perspective on this and provide us with some information. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks for coming out tonight.
No, and thank you to everyone who took the time out of their evening to join us. It's great to have such a group of people together around this arguably a really important issue, not just for Kitchener, but for the region and for both Ontario and the country. As Rob suggested already, I'm Matt Rodrigues. I live in Kitchener, and I ran in this past fall's municipal election for regional council. For those who may not be from the region or joining us from elsewhere, regional council covers the 3 urban cities and then the 4 rural townships. And in Kitchener, there's 4 direct elected regional councillor seats. And so this is a citywide position. There are 4 seats that cover the whole city of Kitchener. And what was unique about this election compared to many other municipal elections or regional elections was there was only one incumbent for those 4 seats. And so there was 3 existing councillors who had decided to step away from regional council. And so there was really this opportunity to come out and run. And so I was one of 14 candidates. So certainly a large number of people came out to join the run in this election. And so, running for regional council is effectively like running for mayor in terms of the audience you need to reach and the scale of election you need to run. Kitchener covers 3 federal ridings or 3 federal provincial ridings. And so it's a significant geography that needs to be covered. And so that's a bit of context about the perspective I bring. And I'm going to touch on 2 key points that, or reflections rather, that I left the election with. And I did unfortunately come just shy of one of those 4 seats. But as Rob said, I'm very proud of what we were able to accomplish as a team and the conversations that we were able to have over the few months of the election period. And so the 2 reflections I want to share are around the sign bylaw and some of the changes that we saw this year on the signs, but also some of the unique perspectives that I think I gained engaging with residents in almost every neighborhood of Kitchener. So on the neighborhood side, it was really interesting going around to each of these neighborhoods and how the conversation evolved and to the level of awareness that different residents in different neighborhoods had of the election, whether they be, say it was a rental community or more predominantly ownership level of community, the socioeconomic status of the community really reflected in overall awareness of the election, that it was even taking place. And I think that's sort of the crux of the election. Is general awareness that it's happening. And so I'll get into that a bit more with signs, but it took a long time for people to understand, oh, there is an election this fall, and this was the 3rd election locally or in Ontario within a year. And so there was, a significant, fatigue, but also a lack of awareness. And so it was really interesting going to these doors as we got closer to how that awareness shifted or didn't shift. There were still neighborhoods by September, by October, where people didn't know, when voting days were. They, didn't know how to vote. They didn't know what a voting card was, how to get it. And as a side note and as a candidate, it was always sort of internally frustrating because you're like, I'm having panic attacks every day, and there's how can't you know? But there's so many reasons why, and I think it's really important that we unpack what those reasons are, because so many people live in such a bubble. If you're an engaged citizen, the bubble of engagement, but once you've left that bubble, for one reason or another, it's tough to become aware of these things. And so going to my third point and sort of just coming back to back to the sign piece. This was the first municipal election that Waterloo Region had run with this election sign bylaw that prohibits candidate signs on regional roads or public property. So you could have a business on a regional road that would take your sign. That was okay, but you couldn't put it on the boulevard or on public property. And so this was a really unique change because, again, we're covering all of Kitchener. It's a massive geography, but it also provides, so it has both pros and cons. And I think on the pro side, it really helps level the playing field. There are those large signs that you see on the side of a road are about $30 a pop. So certainly a financial barrier to many candidates. There's also the resources that are required to get it out there, to put them in, take them out, to maintain them. Sign vandalism happens all the time. And so I don't want to weigh too much into this bylaw and the merits of it, but there was those sort of elements that I saw as beneficial to my campaign. But what it also meant is there was lower election visibility. You could drive along major roads, you could drive through major intersections. There's no signs. Unless you were driving on certain streets in certain neighborhoods, you really weren't seeing signs. You weren't seeing those visual daily prompts on your commute home or your trip to the grocery store. Oh yeah, there's an election. Oh, I should look at that candidate, or I should look into this election a bit further. And so my one reflection and one thing that I think we all need to work on is promoting greater awareness of the election throughout. And I think the municipalities need to take a larger role in this, whether it's paid social media ads, paid signs on public property, just noting that it's election day. I think there's a lot of different tools, and we could probably have a whole brainstorming session about what we could do. But we need to have those. If we're going to ban signs on public property, I think we need to find ways to promote just the fact that it is election day, that it is voting. And then my final reflection is just around expanding voting options. Again, there's a whole town hall on different voting methods, but I think voting options includes different voting dates, different voting locations, different voting means. For example, the closest voting station to downtown Kitchener, which has a high proportion of people who walk, bike, or take transit, or just don't own a car, was up at a community center, quite a bit of a ways away if you don't pass by there frequently. And so that was just an interesting reflection of awareness and seeing those lines. So again, I'm seeing lots of comments come up in the chat about some of the reflections about two-tier government and all these other pieces, and I'd love to get into them, but I'll stop it there. And thanks everyone for joining, and yeah. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Listen, I am going to ask you, because you can't stay till the end, and I do want to ask you this because I saw Dr. Laura Penn had mentioned, raised it too. And you're out there, and you've been to like 16,000 homes. You're out there talking to a lot of people. Your team is out talking to a lot of people. Did the two-tier issue come up? Because you're out there and people may be wondering, are you the ward guy? Are you, what's a region, et cetera? So what was your, on reflection, if you can recall, what was the experience like in talking to people about the two-tier system that we have?
Yeah, and undeniably, the ballot was long. If you again, if you aren't from Kitchener, there was you could vote for 4 people for regional council, you could vote for 4 school board trustees, you could vote for your mayor, and then you could vote for your ward councillor, and then your regional chair. So it's a full page, lots of names, and people, I think after the advanced polls, were commenting how long it was and how they joked that they needed a crib sheet to head in there, and so. Certainly, I think there's an again, that's a whole other town hall on our one or two tier system, and there's certainly pros and cons to it. But
sure.
But it definitely there's a lack of understanding of what the region does, and the region also is a bit of a higher level of government. If your neighbor's playing music too loud, you're likely going to email or call your city councillor and not a regional councillor. And so there's this separation of at least at the regional level of responsibilities and how people connect to them. City councillors are often more out in the local community, at community centers, at the library, you know, at those local events. And there's a bit more of a tangible relationship. Again, just my thoughts on it, but I think it was a long ballot.
Yeah, and on that, you raise a good point. I mean, if you have to look up 14 different candidates to select your 4 regional councillors in Kitchener, and then some wards would have had 5 candidates running for the one spot there's 19. You've got 3 or 4 mayoral candidates and the trustees, school board. Now you're into like 25 people you have to look up to see what their positions are and try to find that information. So yeah, that could be quite a load.
People would say they you know, clipped out the record and did a spreadsheet, and there's only certain people that can do that, who can take that time to do that research. And so I'll leave it at that. Thanks for having me, Rob.